My name is Keith Johnson of Biblical Foundations Academy International, where we inspire people around the world to build a biblical foundation for their faith. I just returned from a 10-week study, research, and discovery journey in the land of Israel to bring you this special report. According to many Christian and Messianic preachers, teachers, radio and television hosts, this could be it. The day of the Lord may be just around the prophetic corner based on their interpretation of Joel chapter 2, verse 31. The sun will be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. To complicate matters, it seems that the stars and planets are lining up to further fuel the fires of end times prophecy. According to these preachers and teachers, something is about to change because of a cosmic pattern that will commence on the dates of Passover 2014 and will reoccur on the Feast of Booths 2014, Passover 2015, and the climax cosmic event will take place on Feast of Booths 2015. As a powerful add-on, they claim that since a solar eclipse is predicted to take place on Nisan 1, 2015, or more appropriately, the first day of the biblical year, the end is near. Even NASA experts are weighing in on the significance of what is happening in the heavens starting on this year's Passover, April 14, 2014. A spokesman for NASA said this is the first eclipse of the year and is well placed for observers throughout the Western Hemisphere. It will occur at the lunar orbit's ascending node in Virgo. This is the first of 4 consecutive total lunar eclipses in 2014 and 2015, a series known as a Tetrad. Since the word tetrad couldn't be found in the Bible, the term blood moon has become the title of choice to explain the connection between what is happening in the heavens and what has and will happen to Israel on earth. What makes this teaching so compelling is the connection they make between past patterns in the heavens with historic moments in Jewish history as a way of legitimizing their quote-unquote prophetic predictions. They claim that when this cosmic pattern of 4 blood moons happened in 1493 to 1494, after the Jews' expulsion from Spain in 1492, it was a prophetic signal. They also claim that when this cosmic pattern of 4 blood moons happened in 1949 to 1950, after the time of the birth of Israel as a nation in 1948, it was a prophetic signal. I find it peculiar that God would send the signal a year after these 2 historic events for Israel. I also find it suspicious that the exact same cosmic pattern took place on Jewish feast days according to the calculated calendar in 162-163 CE, 795-796, 842-843, and 860-861, and there was no significant event in Jewish history with which to sync this powerful prophetic pattern. I'm sure the Bible astrologers/astronomers will remind me of the Tetrad, the 4 blood moon pattern, that took place in 1967 to 1968 that coincided with the 6-day war that expanded Israel's borders that is causing so much international conflict today. I can hear them saying, wait a minute, you planetary pattern party pooper, what do you say about that synced celestial signal in 1967 and 1968? Certainly, I cannot dismiss that the first lunar eclipse, the first of 4 blood moons, that will appear on Passover 2014 will include an astronomical anomaly of Mars, often called the planet of war, appearing as a fiery red star next to the moon. Mars, Earth, and the sun will all align on April 14th in a rare opposition of the planets. My answer? That pattern happens once every 778 days. But who's counting? I'm sure they will point to the trouble in Israel that is taking place right now. Increased conflict on the Temple Mount. My answer? The reason for that is because after Israel took back the Temple Mount in 1967, during the 4 blood moons, they gave it back to the Muslim Waqf as an olive branch for false peace. The Waqf now claims squatters' rights and strut around kicking off Jews and Gentiles who want the freedom to pray, including me, by the way. As an important biblical side note, the only legal transaction for that piece of land took place between Araunah the Jebusite, who sold it to King David. But who cares? What about the shutdown of Israeli embassies around the world, I'm sure they will say? Well, that just happened 2 weeks ago. My answer? That was because the Foreign Ministry of Affairs was on strike because they wanted better pay and benefits for their ambassadors. Those same embassies are back in full operations today. Certainly they're going to say this. What about the breakdown of peace talks between the PLO and Israel brokered by the United States? My answer? Maybe the United States should spend less time trying to force false peace and spend more time and energy creating a peace plan with the God of Israel. Surely, I cannot dismiss the fact that Israel is preparing for war privately and publicly. Military exercises on the increase, talk of war in government, synagogues, and on the street. My answer? I agree. In fact, I was there for the first time ever public display of the Iron Dome defense system. I actually traveled to Tel Aviv to see this rare display of high-tech weaponry with my own two eyes. The way the IDF deals with inaccurate homemade rockets that are being launched against the people of Israel has truly inspired me. So much so, I requested that the company called Raphael, God Heals, that created the Iron Dome provide an English version of their explanation of how the defense system works for our BFA International audience. They obliged.
Short and medium-range rocket and artillery attacks are a lethal menace. They endanger the lives of hundreds of thousands of civilians and inflict heavy damages to property. They are becoming a strategic threat. With a wave of its innovative wand, Raphael has developed a first-of-its-kind counter-rocket artillery mortar CRAM system with pinpoint accuracy interceptors against asymmetric threats, Iron Dome. In an unprecedented short time, Raphael has met the challenge, offering an innovative CRAM system which has successfully passed a series of challenging tests against a wide variety of threats, proving its outstanding effectiveness. The system includes a Battle Management and Control Unit, BMC, detection and tracking radar, and launchers, each equipped with 20 lethal interceptors. The system is mobile, deployment is rapid, and maintenance is simple and user-friendly. A single launcher protects the area of a medium-sized city or strategic installations. The radar detects and tracks the threat. The data is transferred to the BMC and to the launcher, and from launcher to interceptor. The interceptor seeker achieves very accurate endgame homing. Fully linked to other command and control systems in the arena, Iron Dome exchanges data with other sensors to maximize its combat efficiency and avoid fratricide. The system estimates the tracked threat's points of impact and selects to intercept only those that will fall in the protected area. This prevents unnecessary launches against non-threatening targets and makes Iron Dome a very cost-effective system. The innovative system has proven its capability to detect and home in on small targets flying at high speed and over a large area, even in severe weather conditions. The system intercepts all short and medium-range threats and destroys them. Iron Dome operates automatically, day and night. The system can protect stationary or mobile forces against short and medium-range threats. The detonation of the revolutionary interceptor warhead is precisely timed to ensure destruction of the incoming threat's warhead. At an unprecedented pace, Raphael has developed the first of its kind and only operational system in the world for the interception of a wide range of short and medium-range rocket and artillery threats. Iron Dome is a very cost-effective system, selecting out of multiple threats and concentrated salvos only those threats that endanger the protected area. Groundbreaking technological innovation to eliminate the threat of rockets and artillery. Iron Dome.
Well, in the spirit of the Iron Dome, the video that you just saw, I actually want to use that as a point of reference for why the approach that I'm taking is so important. In fact, I haven't let anyone know this, but I feel like calling the BFA International Studios the Iron Dome Studios. We want to be able to have the information, the inspiration, and revelation when we need to have to shoot down any biblical misinterpretation. But I have to be honest with you, there's something that happened in Israel that really touched my heart, and to be honest with you, I was a bit embarrassed. I spend a lot of time doing what I like to call lifestyle evangelism. I used to be a 4 spiritual laws guy. I'd hit people with 4 spiritual laws and move on doing evangelism. But now what I like to do is to let my light shine before people that they might see what God is doing in my life. And as a result of relationships, we're able to move on together. I have a wonderful relationship with so many Jewish people in the land of Israel. One of the situations that really was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back was I was in the house of my host for a couple evenings. I was actually supposed to be leaving to come back to Israel. I was able to stay for a longer period of time, and as a result, this whole issue of the research regarding the 4 blood moons is what came as a result of that. But as I was in the house of one of my hosts during my time, she likes to watch what we call a METV, Middle East television. And so when I come there, she'll say, hey, let's watch METV. And so we'll do that. Well, during this particular time, we watched 2 shows. Both of them were about the blood moons. And as I mentioned earlier, I happened to be a bit embarrassed. One of the shows, the entire time, they were talking about how to give a blood moon offering. And as I was sitting there with my 70-year-old Jewish friend, this lady happens to be an Orthodox Jewish lady. She was flabbergasted. And to be honest, as I mentioned, I was embarrassed. I'm actually going to do an audio blog about that. I don't want to talk a lot about the time. I want you to get a chance to hear from her how it affected her. But when I was sharing with her about the blood moons and her response, it really caught my attention, and it broke my heart. So here's what I want to do right now. I want to take some time to shoot down some of the biblical misinterpretation in the spirit of the Iron Dome. And how we're going to do that is actually open the scriptures. So right now, let's get started. Let's go to Joel chapter 2, verse 31. And again, this has been the control verse for those that are promoting this teaching. It says, the sun will be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and awesome day of the Lord. Now, here's one of the things that I am known for. It's 2 little words. It's called keep reading. And if we keep reading, if we put this verse in context, we find out something really interesting. If we go to Joel chapter 2, verse 10, here's what it says. Before then, the earth quakes. Before them, the earth quakes. The heavens tremble, the sun and the moon grow dark, and the stars lose their brightness. In other words, Joel, earlier, before he gets to 2:31, he gives some context to what's going to happen. He says 4 things, actually. The earth quakes, the heavens tremble, the sun and the moon grow dark, and the stars lose their brightness. I think that's an indicator for us. If I go to Joel 3:15, it says the sun and the moon grow dark, and the stars lose their brightness. So if we're looking at Joel and we put it in context, we understand that it isn't just about the moon turning to blood and the sun turning dark. There's actually the issue of the stars and an actual great shaking. If we just stayed in Joel, maybe you could say, well, Keith, you need a little more context to bring to that, which is exactly what I love to do. The Bible is filled with what I call language, history, and context. And one of the things that I've found that's been a great mistake amongst some of those that promote different teachings is they don't give context to the actual teaching that they're bringing forth. So let's bring some context to what it is that does happen around the great and terrible day of the Lord. Let's look at Isaiah chapter 13, verse 9. I love this verse. It says this: "Behold, the day of the Lord," capital L, capital O, capital R, and capital D, "is coming." Now, if you know anything about the Biblical Foundations Academy International, one of the things that I have been really excited about is to give people a chance to encounter God's time, God's Torah, and God's Tetragrammaton, his four-letter name, which in the English Bible, they cover over with a capital L, a capital O, a capital R, and a capital D. If we go beyond that particular translation, we'll see four Hebrew letters, Yud, He, Vav, He, and you can go to our website to learn as much as you can about that. But what I love about this is that it's a chance to kind of go behind it. What it says in Isaiah 13:10 is, "For the stars of heaven and their constellations will not flash forth their light. The sun will be dark when it rises, and the moon will not shed its light." Again, here we have three different things: the stars of heaven and their constellations. Now, the word that's used there is a very interesting word. It's called kesilehem. And that particular word is only used one time in this context. However, the word itself we find throughout the Hebrew Bible as far as the word for, foolishness. But let's move on. "It will not flash forth their light. The sun will be dark when it rises, and the moon will not shed its light." Now, let me just give you one little astronomical fact. If the sun does not shine, the moon does not shine. In other words, the only reason that the moon brings forth any light is it's reflecting the light from the sun. So when the sun doesn't shine, the moon doesn't shine. It's just an astronomical fact. Verse Isaiah 13:13 says this: "Therefore I will make the heavens tremble, and the earth will be shaken from its place at the fury of the capital Lord of hosts in the day of his burning anger." So Isaiah clearly is speaking about the day of the Lord, and he's giving us four things that we can expect. Those four things: the sun, the moon, the stars, and the shaking. That's an indication to me that there's some expectation of what this day of the Lord will look like. If we go to Ezekiel chapter 32, verse 7, and I hope you've got your Bibles open. There's one of the things that I love about being a part of the BFA is that I'm not interested in building a teaching around my personality. What I do love, however, is to give access to information for you yourself so that you can see it for yourself. That's what changed my entire approach to the Bible. I didn't want to get into a situation where I found myself dependent on someone else's opinion. I love the scholars. I love the opinions of the great teachers. But what I love to do is to balance that with what I actually see in Scripture. And sometimes when you look in the Bible and you see it in context, it can give you a dimension that really can change your perspective. Ezekiel chapter 32, verse 7. "And when I extinguish you," this is capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D, speaking, "I will cover the heavens and darken their stars. I will cover the sun with a cloud, and the moon will not give its light." There again, we've got something happening with the stars. We have something happening with the sun. We have something happening with the moon. Now, of course, if you understand the blood moon teaching, what they're saying is that over about an 18-month period of time, the moon is going to be turned to blood, and that one particular event in the middle of the four blood moons will be a solar eclipse. I find that to be interesting because what they're saying is this planetary pattern, this cosmic synced event is going to include sometimes when we're dealing with just the moon, sometimes where we're dealing with just the sun. Now, what I find interesting about the scriptural approach to this, it seems that the day of the Lord, the day of Yud He Vav He, whom by the oldest, most complete manuscripts that we have would be the pronunciation of Yehovah, but I'm not going to focus on pronunciation, but that his day, there would be these four things. Now, what I love is to get into the New Testament, specifically in Matthew. This is a great verse because what Jesus does, Yeshua, for those that call him that, he does something really interesting. He takes the information from what we understand in the Tanakh, in the Hebrew scriptures, and he gives a little bit more of information regarding to what we can expect. He says this in Matthew 24, verse 29. But immediately after the tribulation of those days, somebody say after, it says 4 things. The sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky. And then it says, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Now, I love the fact that people are beginning to ask questions. I love the fact for the information that is increasing in terms of our ability to get to the scriptures. But what I think is so important is, again, bringing all of these teachings into context. What Yeshua says, Jesus, he says that there's going to be 4 things that are going to be happening. Now, here's what I think we can expect. We should expect when the great and terrible day of the Lord happens, there will be 4 signs when the day of the Lord comes, not 4 blood moons. These 4 blood moons will happen over an 18-month period of time with a one-time eclipse. However, when the day of the Lord happens, it's all going to happen at one time. Now, here's where there's a little bit of controversy. There are some people that would say that God is going to need man-made weaponry in order to do what he's going to do. In other words, it's going to be whether it's war or nuclear war. Let me tell you something. I don't think, according to Scripture, that he's going to need any man-made weaponry to bring darkness over the land. Just ask Pharaoh. There was no need for any sort of weaponry when darkness fell over the land. There was no shining of the star. There was no shining of the sun. There was no shining of the moon. There was darkness. And whenever he wants to, because he's God, he can bring darkness. And let me tell you something else that I think is really, really interesting. The 4 blood moons, which they call a signal from God, this is really interesting. Even NASA says this. The first 3 blood moons, or the first 3 lunar eclipses, cannot even be seen in the land of Israel. In other words, if this is a signal for Israel, you would think, like the other signs that God brings forward, it would be for the people that he's trying to speak to. It isn't until the 4th moon, the 4th lunar eclipse, that there'll ever be any ability for Israel to even see it. I think that that's kind of interesting. Now, I'm going to be a little creative with you. I want you to give me just a little bit of grace, because one of the things I was trying to figure out is how to talk about this without necessarily attacking any individuals, disparaging any teachers or preachers by name. I simply want to give the information to the people that I believe presently are under attack with what I call the misinterpretation of Scripture. I was in San Diego talking about this event, and I want to tell you just a little bit of background about this. I was invited to come to San Diego 2 days after landing in Israel. And why this is important is that I wasn't even supposed to be in Israel for the last 2 weeks of the month. But I was supposed to be coming back in about the 15th or so of March. Everyone, my family was expecting it. I'd already been gone for about 8 weeks. And then something happened. I came into contact with this particular teaching around some other things that I was dealing with, and I felt like there was no way I could leave Israel without seeing with my own 2 eyes an important event in the biblical reckoning of time. This event would potentially take place on March 31st. And so I determined at that point that I would need to stay until March 31st to see with my own 2 eyes so that I could let you know here from our Iron Dome studios that God's clock was completely and utterly on time. And sure enough, you all, I've got a chance to see with my own 2 eyes the beginning of that. But then I had to ask myself the question. Like I mentioned, I don't want to be negative. I want to be positive. But I want to find creative ways to help people understand the information. So I'm in San Diego. I'm sharing the blood moon Mania Eclipsed. I'm doing this message, and before I do it, 2 things happened. One thing was I was in the hotel room. My wife, Andrea, we were there in the hotel room, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, here comes the alarm. Beep, beep, beep. And my wife, she's so she's amazing. I mean, she hears the alarm. She's out the front door. I'm on the phone trying to figure out what's going on. She's out. She's like, hey, well, let's get out of here. I call the people, and sure enough, about 5 minutes or so later, we hear this message. During the time that I'm doing this message in the hotel that I'm there, the message is, this was a false alarm. Let me be clear. In 2012, I told people, I stood up, I'm not a prophet, nor the son of a prophet, but I stood up in 2012 and I said this: the Mayan calendar is not upon the wall of the throne room of God. I told people, according to the Mayan calendar, the gig is up. If you believe that, send your possessions to me. I will watch them for you. And then after it's over and you realize that the Mayan calendar is not synced with God's calendar, you then can get your possessions back for a small fee. Let me say something. Right now, the 4 blood moons or the Tetrad or whatever you want to call it, they are not up, like, right here, we have this graphic of these moons. This is not something that's up on the throne room of God. He's not looking and saying, oh my goodness, here come the 4 blood. I'm telling you, he's not basic. So I had to come up with something creative. So I want you to give me a little grace. Here's what I think happened creatively. There are rumors in heaven, and I think that these rumors sometimes find themselves to earth. So this is what I think happened. Since January 2012, there is a group that's called the AA group in heaven. I call them the angelic astronomers. At different times throughout history, this group up in heaven, called the AA group, the angelic astronomers, they sometimes will gain more popularity. And I think as a result of the 4 blood moons, or the Tetrad, or whatever you want to call it, these angelic astronomers are becoming popular again. I think as a result of them sending the message to the other angels that the 4 blood moons are coming around the time of Passover and Sukkot, I think the message has then crossed into some of the other corners of heaven where that maybe even some of the other angels are getting excited about the 4 blood moons. I think up in heaven that the angelic hosts are increasing military exercises for war and even heaven quake drills. If you understand about what has to happen, the heavens have to shake, the earth has to shake, the stars have to be darkened, the sun and the moon. I think the angelic hosts are increasing their military exercises. I think also that Gabriel, the one who's going to blow the shofar on that last day, the great trump, I think up in heaven, even he was influenced and has been practicing more than normal. Normally he practices maybe once every Jubilee, 50 years, Maybe now he's practicing morning, noon, and night the closer we get to the 4 blood moons. I think there were probably even rumors that the heavenly tailors were seen in the Messiah's quarters, fitting him for the last day. I think if you were up in heaven right now and you heard about all this, it would cause there to be a great shift that would take place, all based on at least 2 angelic astronomers. Now, I think that after a while, there'd probably be a meeting that would take place. I can imagine the Father, the creator of the universe, Yehovah himself, calling forth Gabriel and saying, Gabriel, is it true that the angelic astronomers are back at it again? I can hear Gabriel saying, yes, sir, they're back at it again. Is it true that Michael has been calling for more military exercises with the angelic host? And I can hear Gabriel saying, yes, sir, it's true. Gabriel, have I been hearing your shofar being blown morning, noon, and night? Have you also gotten caught up? And I can hear Gabriel saying, well, yes, sir, I have. What's this I hear about the angelic tailors going into the quarters of the Messiah and fitting him with the red robes? Is that true? Well, actually, they're not red. They're purple. But yeah. I mean, they're just checking. I can imagine the Father in heaven saying this, son. Gabriel, have a seat. Now, if you didn't catch it yet, you can be Gabriel and the angels can be the masses. But let me continue with the story. I can imagine him sitting down Gabriel and saying, Gabriel, do you know that since the 1st century up until 2100, there will be 62 tetrads, or what they're calling down in the Messianic and Christian movement, the 4 full moon eclipses or the 4 blood moons. Do you know that there will be 62 of those from the century 1 until, I didn't know that. Gabriel, do you know that 7 of these tetrads fell on Jewish feast days according to the calculated calendar. Now, Gabriel, you understand the calculated calendar isn't necessarily always in sync with the biblical calendar. Yes, sir, I'm aware of that. Do you know that based on the calculated calendar of those 4 blood moons falling on those important feast days, that 2 or maybe 1/6 of the time, those particular moons don't even match with the biblical? Are you aware of this, Gabriel? I understand. Can you imagine him saying this to Gabriel? 4 out of the 7 historic events that took place, 4 out of them were irrelevant to Israel. And of the 3 significant ones, 2 of the 3 took place a year after the event. Gabriel, are you aware of that? And I can hear Gabriel saying, yeah. Gabriel, do you know that 3 of the 4 blood moons that are coming won't even be seen in my land of Israel? Yeah, I'm aware of that. I can hear him saying to Gabriel, by the way, between you and me, I may not even allow my biblical calendar to sync with the next 3 blood moons of 2014-15 calculated calendar. For those that don't know, I can imagine him saying maybe some of the angels don't realize, maybe they've got caught up that this calculated calendar that's taking place is a calculated calendar that NASA can look at and those that are dispersed throughout the land can look at. But in terms of the biblical calendar, we've got to be able to see it with our eyes. We've got to know what's happening in heaven and on earth to know according to the biblical standard what time it is. I can hear him saying this. Remind the angels about the name I gave Israel. And what is that name? They will contend with God and with man, and they shall prevail. I can imagine him telling Gabriel, and maybe those of you that might understand what I'm saying, I can imagine him saying to Gabriel, tell the angels to get back to work. I feel like that's something that we're called to. You know, I was in San Diego, and as I was preparing to share this, I was up early in the morning because my body was so off. I don't know what day it is. I was on the West Coast. I was in Israel, and what time are you supposed to sleep, and what time are you supposed to be awake? And I was up early in the morning, and I was praying, and I heard 5 simple words. Teach my people my word. Teach my people my word. Teach my people and I'm up praying, and it's like 4:30 in the morning, and Andrea's in the hotel room, and she must have heard me mumbling over and over again, hearing these words. Teach my people my word. So what do? The context is clear. We should be looking for 4 things: sun, moon, stars, and a great shaking. I think that's why the angels are doing their heaven quake drills. They know that when Daddy, Father, Creator, Yehovah decides that it's the last day, it's not going to be based on an 18-month period of some 4 lunar eclipses with a one-time solar eclipse that's happened in the past, that's happening now, and that will happen in the future. I don't believe, according to the scriptural understanding of what the day of the Lord looks like, of the hint that we have, that the 4 blood moons even line up in terms of biblical integrity. I do believe this. If we teach his people his word, they'll open up and see a verse like Jeremiah 31:35 that says this. Thus saith Yehovah, who gives the sun for light by day, and the fixed order, or the statute, of the moon and the stars for light by night, who stirs up the sea so that its waves roar. Yehovah of hosts is his name. I think they look at Jeremiah 31:36. It says, if the fixed order, or the statute, departs from before me, declares Yehovah, then the offspring of Israel also will cease from being a nation before me forever. In other words, he has set patterns in the heavens. He says if that should cease, then also Israel will cease. Isaiah 47:13 gets even deeper. You are wearied with your many counsels. Let now the astrologers, those who prophesy by the stars, and I don't know if you know it or not, it's amazing. You know, you can go to any city right now. You can go to any newspaper in any city right now, and you will find astrology in the newspaper. You won't find much astronomy except for around events like this. But every single day, you can go to a newspaper in any city and there'll be an astrology section. What's interesting is that you can go to two different newspapers in the same city and you'll find that the astrological statement for those that are born in a certain sign will be one way in one newspaper and another way in another newspaper. I find that to be interesting. Isaiah 47:13 says, "Let now those astrologers, those who prophesy by the stars, those who predict by the new moons, stand up and save you from what will come upon you." I hate to be so strong about this, but I have to be honest with you. I am concerned about those that are doing the very thing that is an abomination before him. To be able to prophesy by the stars, listen, let me be really clear with you. As I said it earlier, our Father in heaven doesn't need 4 blood moons to know what time it is. In fact, I'll give you a hint. I don't even think he's looking at the 4 blood moons. I don't even think the 4 blood moons are up on the wall. I think our Father in heaven already knows when and where and how he will do what he will do. I did a series called The Road to Reformation. And in this series, it was really amazing because there's this young man named Josiah. If you didn't see the series, it's available on our website. But The Road to Reformation, I didn't get a chance to talk about this one particular verse or section of the verse, but Josiah did a really radical thing. He began to challenge everything that was going around in the land of Israel, and he began to tear down some things that as a result of that, he put things back in place. And when he put them back in place, he was setting up to be able to get connected again with God's clock, to be synced with his time. But in 2 Kings 23:5, I love this verse, especially as it pertains to what's happening right now. 2 Kings 23:5. Josiah did away with the idolatrous priests whom the kings of Judah had appointed to burn incense in the high places, in the cities of Judah, and in the surrounding area of Jerusalem. Then it goes further. Also, those who burned incense to Baal, to the sun, and to the moon, and then this amazing little add-on, and to the constellations and to all the hosts of heaven. Interesting, in Isaiah uses the word constellations in English, but the Hebrew word behind constellations in Isaiah is not the same Hebrew word that's behind constellations here. You will find 2 times in the Bible, Isaiah and in 2 Kings, where the English word constellations is used. However, there's only one Hebrew word used throughout the entire Tanakh for constellations that Josiah is talking about here. It says, "And to the constellations and to all the host of heaven." In other words, there were priests and people who would look up into the sky and see the constellation, and they would burn incense to it and worship it and focus on it. It really kind of makes sense a little bit, because when you look up in the sky, you see the constellations and they're amazing. Real quick sidelight. Right now in the Northern Hemisphere, if I look up at the Northern Hemisphere, the most clear constellation I see is the Big Dipper. There are 7 stars in the Big Dipper, but if we look a little closer, we actually see 8, and if we look even closer, there's actually more than 8, but that's another story. Right now, throughout history, we've looked up and we call it the Big Dipper. Over in France, they call it the casserole. In the medieval times in Europe, they used to call it a plow. If you go to the Native Americans and to other people, they call it something else. In fact, ancient Egypt looked up and saw the same constellation, and what they did is they connected the dots and they said it's a bull leading a man on its side with a hippopotamus with a crocodile on its back. In other words, the stars can be interpreted based on the time. I think if we were to come up with new names of constellations, somebody would look up and say, "I see a computer keyboard." Someone else would look up and say, "I see a spaceship." Someone else would look up and say, "I see a flash drive." In other words, the stars do not have lines that are connected unless we connect them. So throughout history, different groups at different times, different circumstances have seen something different. During the time of Judah, the kings of Judah during Josiah, there were people that looked up and saw the constellations and began to worship them. Now, the interesting word that only shows up one time, here's what it says in Hebrew. The Mazalot and all of their host. The Mazalot. You might know something about this word, Mazalot, the plural of the word Mazel. Now, presently over in Israel, there are many people that when they want to say congratulations, they'll say Mazel Tov, which means good luck or good sign to you. And so right now, people use this in the modern Hebrew language, Mazel Tov. What is happening with Josiah, they're saying, listen, there were people that were actually worshiping the Mazalot. And let me be honest with you, presently in Christianity and in the Messianic movement and many other religions around the world, the same thing is happening. We're not supposed to look up at the stars and worship the stars. We're supposed to look up at the stars and say, isn't he amazing? Isn't he mad? In fact, I wish more people were excited about the 4 blood moons, not because there's some prophetic statement of the day of the Lord, but rather they're another example of his amazing pattern that he has in the heavens. He's amazing. The stars and the moon, they all line up because he's God. He's so amazing. You should be calling your neighbor and saying, hey, have you heard about the blood moon teaching? No, you should call your neighbor and say, have you heard about what's happening in the heavens? Isn't it amazing, the witness to the power and the creativity and the scientific mind of the creator of the universe? He's not overwhelmed when he hears about 4 blood moons. He's the one that made them happen. Now, NASA calls them tetrads. The preachers call them blood moons. I think he just says, this is something I do. It's the fixed order of the heavens, the hosts. Now, let's try to do something. Can I just give us one verse that's been used, in my opinion, that's kind of thrown things off? I want you to turn with me, if you would, to Genesis chapter 1, verse 14. Now, I happen to have the Bible that Yeshua, Jesus, read. This is the Hebrew Tanakh in the language that the scriptures were written in. And I think that when he would read this and look at this verse, he would understand it to be the way, in context, it's pretty amazing. The 4th day in the book of Genesis, during the time of creation, that 4th day is where we find out about this sun and the moon. The one verse that's been, if I can say, interpreted to give more validity to the signal that God is sending is Genesis 1:14. Now, in the Hebrew, it's very, very interesting. In the English, sometimes we can make some assumptions. Now, I will tell you something that happens with me that's caused a bit of conflict. People oftentimes come to me and say, the Strong's word is, and what they don't realize about the Strong's concordance is that it's a concordance. A concordance lets us know how many times and where a word shows up. When you come to me with the Strong's concordance, hopefully you're telling me about the times that a word is actually placed in Scripture. But when you come to me with the Strong's concordance and give me the lexical meaning, Strong's never intended for the concordance to be a lexicon. A lexicon is separate than a concordance. And I find this over and over again. And again, I think that's partially what happened regarding the teaching of the 4 blood moons. Genesis 1:14, here's what it says. And God said, there will be lights in the firmament of the heavens to separate between the day and between the night, and they shall be for signs. Now, what some people have done is they've stopped and seen the word ot, sign, and then of course it's in the plural, leot. They will be for signs, and they've said that according to the Strongs, this can mean signals. God has sent a signal, like he sent a signal to the people in 1492, though the signal was after they. Anyway, he sent a signal in 1949, though it was, no. What they say is these are signals. Now, I think it's amazing that God says these shall be for signs. These signs, which will come through the 2 lights that are up in the heavens, are supposed to be for a reason. And in the Hebrew, it's really amazing. It says they shall be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. Of course, the English Bible says seasons, so that you'll think fall, winter, spring, and summer. Rather, we understand that the word is the moedim. That word is amazing. I think the root of that word, 7 different English words are used based on the root of the word, moed. But the moedim are the appointments of God. And how do the appointments of God come? But based on the sighting of his clock, his moon. Now, here's what's interesting about the verse. They shall be for moedim, And then for days, and how do we know about days? Based on the sun. So the first word we can see as the moon, the second word we can see as the sun, and then the third word is and for years. And how do we know about the years? We've got to understand the sun and the moon. I love the English translations. I love to compare English translations. And there's one English translation that for this verse I think is pretty interesting. The JPS version, the Jewish Publication Society, reads it this way. God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate day from night. They shall serve as signs for the set times, the days and the years." Now, when I read my Hebrew Bible, that's kind of what I see. In other words, these signs are for a reason. And what's the reason? For the Moedim, for the Yamim, and the Shanim. The years, the days, and the actual months, or the seasons. Here's what we know about the importance of this word Moedim. You've heard it over and over again. Psalm 104:19 says this: "He made the moon for the seasons," or for the Moedim. Jeremiah 8:7, "Even the stork in the sky knows her seasons." That's in the feminine Moedim. "And the turtle dove and the swift and the thrush observe the time of their migration. But my people do not know the ordinance of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yehovah, or the Lord," for my English reading friends. There's simple instruction. And I want to end you with this simple instruction. I want to give it to you. I want you to check it for yourself. But it's amazing. You know, I was in Israel. I stayed longer because of this simple instruction. Here's what it says in Exodus chapter 12, verse 1. And I think it's so amazing that there's so much confusion in the movements about whether we need the calculation of the seasons, or whether we need the calculation of the calculated calendar, and whether we should have the equinox or not the equinox. It's amazing how simple this is. In Exodus 12:1, the creator of the universe is telling Moses and Aaron, now look, I'm about to do this amazing Passover thing. I'm about to do this amazing thing where I'm going to bring the people out of the land. And in Exodus 12:1, it says this: "Now Yehovah said unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt." Exodus 12:2. "This month shall be the beginning of months for you. It is to be the first month of the year to you." Clear. Simple. Moses and Aaron look up. They see the first sliver of the moon, and he's saying, now you see that? It's the beginning of the month. It's either going to be 29 or 30 days. Over time, you understand that. And throughout Scripture, and I'm not teaching this right now, but throughout Scripture, it becomes very clear that God set his sun and his moon in the firmament of the heavens to be for signs for us, to understand what time it is for us, when we're supposed to meet with him. Because if you don't know it, he's got this wonderful thing up on the wall. It's his appointment calendar. And in the calendar, it says, "Meet with my people." For example, right now, there is a meeting that's going to take place. It's going to take place at the time that everyone else is all excited about the 4 blood moons. Now, I think the beautiful thing about the 4 blood moons is that maybe it's going to get some people excited about God's appointments. I'll tell you what I think's happened so far. There's been an attempted hijack of Feast of Unleavened Bread and Passover and Sukkot. I think that we've got to stop that, and we've got to let people know our God, our amazing Father in heaven, the creator of the universe, he is so amazing. He has determined that he has meetings set for his people. These meetings, according to what we understand here, are based on his clock and his calendar. This month shall be the beginning of months for you. It is to be the first month of the year to you. Now, let me just be even a little more clear. Right now, everyone is excited about Passover falling at the same time as the calculations of NASA. In other words, NASA's got a calculated ability to look and see when things are, and there's a calculated calendar. Why is there a calculated calendar? Here's where things get a little controversial. Many people believe that the calculated calendar that our present rabbinic authority goes by, the rabbinic calendar, or some people call it the Jewish calendar, which is really not the best way to say it, because when you think Jewish calendar, you've got to determine, are you talking about the Jewish calendar that they followed in biblical times, or are you talking about the Jewish calendar they've been following since around 359 when they were kicked out of the land? The present calendar that people call the Jewish calendar is a calculated calendar. It's on a 19-year cycle. That particular 19-year cycle is the same cycle that our Chinese brothers and sisters go by. It's the same cycle that the Babylonians went by. It is a calendar of convenience. Why do they go by this calendar? Because in 359, Hillel II said, look, we're no longer in the land. And since we're no longer in the land, we need to be able to know when these important appointments are. These appointments are the life breath. These appointments are the life breath of Israel. We got to know when God, our creator of the universe, wants to meet with us. And so he created this calendar based on an ancient system, a calculation. And as a result of that, that's the calendar that the present rabbis go by. If you ask any rabbi in Israel, and I ask them, what is the biblical calendar? They will tell you, oh, the biblical calendar is based on the sighting of God's clock, the understanding of what's happening in the earth, and the two let us know what time it is. But right now, we're going by rabbinic authority until Messiah comes. When Messiah comes, we'll go back to the sighting of God's clock and knowing what's happening in the earth. But I just have to ask the question, why do we have to wait? God is already in this generation doing an amazing miracle. Rather than getting excited about Israel becoming a nation a year before some 4 blood moons, let's get excited about Israel becoming a nation in light of the fact that becoming that nation, the prophecies of the prophets are taking place in our midst. People from north, south, east, and west are coming back to the land of Israel. There are people that have coming back because of persecution. There are people that are coming back because of revelation. There are people that are coming back because they found out, guess what? I am actually connected to the people in the land of Israel. I am a bloodlines connected. There are people that are coming back from Africa. There are people that are coming back from Argentina. In fact, folks that are in France through persecution, Germany in the past, they're coming back not because of that, but because God said it would happen. This, my friends, is what we should get excited about. Prophecy is taking place in our midst. And the Father in heaven is not a man that he should change his mind, not the Son of Man that he should change his mind. He doesn't change his mind. He doesn't speak and not act, promise and not fulfill. It's happening. What he said in the past is happening in the present, and it's happening in the future. Now let me make this statement. God's clock, again, is not synced to what's happening with 4 blood moons. That clock has been, is, and shall be his calendar and clock that he's calling his people to. Here's how I'd like to end. I did something really amazing when I was in Israel. This particular month, this month that's the Passover month, is based on the sighting of God's clock at the beginning of the month. However, this year, it was going to be a very complicated and difficult sighting. So my friend Nehemiah Gordon and I actually decided, he flew from China, I was there, I stayed longer. We actually traveled down to the Egyptian border to sight God's clock. All the things that we went through, I cannot wait. I cannot wait until we can bring to you what's going to happen during this coming 7th month. We're doing a series called Right on Time. It is going to be fascinating. It's going to be amazing. I cannot wait until we can bring that to you. In fact, the Iron Dome thing that happened, it happened as a result of the research we were doing on the 7th month. But I couldn't hold the Iron Dome. Don't tell you. I had to show it to you now. But here's what's amazing. I went down there, stood up on a mountain, and saw something that I don't know if our guys can do it. I hope they can. I want to show you what I saw as I looked over into the land of Egypt and saw God's clock, his sun, begin to set. And after his sun set, we got the report that his clock, his moon, came up beautiful with the first sliver, and people around the world began to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and they would celebrate the Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Is it not amazing to anyone else that they've hijacked the importance of Passover, the period of time where Yeshua, Jesus himself, who was crucified during the time of Passover? And yet we're more excited about blood moons? Come on, people. Let's get on God's clock. There's always something significant when you are in line and on time with his clock. So in closing, I want to show you this beautiful sunset from the land of Israel looking over into Egypt, so that you, my friends, rather than you counting down to the 4 blood moons, you can count down to the beginning of God's Moed, his Moedim, his times. And guess what? I'm going to keep talking about this. After this first blood moon, and let me give you a hint, we'll be around on the 16th after this first one. And then when Sukkot comes in the fall, they're going to say, it's going to be Sukkot. And guess what? I'll talk about it again. And then the next time on the first day of the month, maybe I'll get back to Egypt or Israel and look again and see the solar eclipse that some people say, it's over, it's done. And I'm here to tell you, maybe I'll still be around for that. And then Passover, I'll be there again. And guess what's going to happen? On the 4th Tetrad, the 4th blood moon, they say it's going to be a super moon in Israel. And then Israel will see it. And by then, I'm sure they'll read it, write another book, and someone will have another presentation about it. And I hope to be in Israel then too, to let you know that these amazing sights in heaven, that's what they are. They're amazing sights. The angels get excited sometimes. Preachers get excited sometimes. The people sometimes fall prey to this sort of thing. But I'm telling you something, open your Bible and read. When our Father in heaven decides to set up his kingdom on earth, there won't be any confusion whether you're in China, Africa, any part of the United States or Israel. We'll all see when his time comes to pass. I want to leave you with this wonderful sunset overlooking the time of Egypt, where it says in Exodus chapter 12, this shall be the beginning of months for you. And after you see that, you count. And hopefully, you will be connected right according to God's clock with what time it is for his appointed meeting.
In 2001, a prayer was spoken from the top of a mountain in Colorado by our founder, Keith Johnson, that led him to have a vivid dream a year later, which radically changed his life. He was invited on a journey of discovery to the land of Israel to encounter 3 important things. Since that time, he has committed his life to help people understand God's time, God's Torah, and God's Tetragrammaton, his name. The vision for our ministry came about as the result of time he spent in the ancient tunnels under the old city of Jerusalem. Seeing the massive foundation stones that support the Western Wall inspired the creation of Biblical Foundations Academy International. There have been opportunities to provide information, inspiration, and revelation to people around the world through television, radio, books, internet, DVDs, and live presentations.
Visit BFAInternational.com today and join our online academy for free. You'll get immediate access to start watching all of Keith Johnson's latest programs, including the Time Will Tell series, Rediscovering God's Clock from Israel and Beyond, the Now is the Time miniseries, based in New York City and Washington, D.C., The Road to Reformation, a 10-step study for biblical reformation, the Open Door series, 18 hours of exciting teaching from a national speaking tour, His Hallowed Name, a series on God's name that was banned from TV. Also, hear directly from Keith Johnson through weekly personal blog updates. Why delay? Visit BFAInternational.com right now. Then click the Enter the Academy button. Visit us today.